The first thing Farren Vell noticed when he woke up was the sterile tang of disinfectant, followed by the cold, soft light washing over everything in an unsettling blue hue. The second thing he noticed was that his left thigh felt like it had been mauled by a brick-stuffed pillowcase. A gentle hum vibrated through the walls of the medbay, and a translucent panel above his head displayed unreadable glyphs scrolling like a news ticker. He shifted, letting out an involuntary groan as his ribs protested. A tall, willowy alien in a pale green uniform stood nearby, tapping rhythmically on a floating interface. Its skin shimmered like boiled glass, and its eyes, large and faceted, shifted toward him. "You are awake," the alien said, its voice carrying an odd melody, like wind through hollow reeds. "You are stable but contaminated." Farren blinked. "What?" "You are experiencing internal discoloration across multiple epidermal regions. This suggests potent hemotoxic exposure," the alien said, stepping closer. It held up a long probe and waved it near Farren's chest. "The toxin appears to be spreading." Farren winced as he tried to sit up. "That's not poison, I just bruise easily." The alien paused mid-scan. "Explain?" Farren gestured vaguely at himself. "I took a fall during the supply drop 3 days ago, crashed into a container, I bruise." "It happens. You were not struck by a blunt object in combat." "No, I tripped on a loose tether." The alien blinked both eyes asynchronously, which Farren assumed meant confusion. "You sustained this level of dermal trauma from a misstep," Farren nodded. "Yeah." The alien stared at him for a long moment, then turned abruptly and began tapping furiously on its interface. The glyphs turned red. Another alien entered, shorter, with silvery skin that rippled as it moved. Farren sighed. "Oh, great." "You called for backup." "I am Marnell," the new alien said. "Triage specialist. You are contaminated with something unknown. We must initiate cellular extraction." Farren's eyes widened. "Whoa, hold on. You're not pulling anything out of me." Marnell turned to the other alien. "He is displaying resistance, possibly delirium." Farren flopped back against the padded table. "I'm not delirious. I'm telling you, my body bruises easily. It's genetic. My mom had it. My uncle had it. I've had it since I was a kid." "It's not poison." The first alien, whose name tag read Keth, tilted his head. "A genetic condition that mimics poisoning?" "Mimics. No, it's just look. Humans bleed under the skin if the capillaries break. Sometimes for dumb reasons." Keth tapped his interface again, then displayed a hologram of Farren's thigh. The dark blotches had spread outward since the earlier scan. "This does not appear benign." Farren ground his teeth. "I know how it looks, but I'm not dying." Marnell turned to Keth. "Prepare Quarantine Bay 77. Before Farren could protest, he was already being wheeled down a corridor, the bed hovering a foot above the floor. "Can I at least call Dr. Zayla?" Farren said as the lights passed overhead. "She knows my medical file." "No communication until toxin is identified," Keth replied. The quarantine bay was colder and smaller. A transparent wall sealed him inside. 2 mechanical arms dangled above his head, twitching occasionally like curious birds. Farren spent the next 4 hours trying to convince the aliens that purple bruises on a human didn't mean he was melting from the inside. He listed every time he'd bruised from bumping into door frames, sitting too hard, even once from sneezing while carrying a box. None of it seemed to help. Eventually, Zayla Parn burst into the room, her dark curls bouncing as she marched up to the console outside the bay. "What the hell is going on?" Marnell turned. "Your crewmate is infected." "No, he's not," Zayla snapped. "He has a known bleeding disorder. It's in his file." "Did you even check?" Keth's head tilted. "It was not in the active medical log." Zayla typed something rapidly. "Because it's not a medical emergency. It's like, you ever bump your knee and get a bruise? It's that, but worse." Marnell peered at the data. "But the discoloration patterns are aggressive." "Because he fell, you know that part, right?" Farren banged the wall. "Thank you." Zayla entered the bay after overriding the quarantine. She knelt beside him. "Anything broken? Not sure." My ribs feel like crushed soda cans. I'll arrange a scan, but no more tests unless I approve them. It took another hour for the alien medics to back off. Farren was moved to an observation room with Zayla by his side. She ran a full scan and confirmed 2 cracked ribs and some deep tissue bruising, but nothing more serious. "You're lucky," she said, wrapping his torso in a compression band. "Could have been worse." "I tried to tell them," he muttered. "I know. But to be fair, your bruises do look like someone jabbed you with a trench spike." The next day, Farren was assigned light duties. He worked in the hydroponics bay cataloging seed growth rates, far from anything that could fall on him. Keth visited twice, monitoring his progress, watching his skin with unnerving interest. "You still believe this is normal?" Keth asked, pointing at a yellowing bruise on Farren's shoulder. "It's fading. That's how healing works." Keth tapped his chin. "Your physiology is unnecessarily delicate." Farren chuckled, then winced. "Yeah, thanks for that." 3 days later, Marnell returned with a med kit the size of a microwave. "I have developed a diagnostic profile for your condition." Farren glanced at Zayla, who rolled her eyes. "He's already diagnosed. I have created a simulation module," Marnell continued. "It allows other medical staff to understand your condition without misidentifying it as poisoning." Farren raised an eyebrow. "You made a bruise simulator?" "Yes." Zayla folded her arms. "You seriously built a training tool because you didn't believe him?" "I prefer to say I acted with caution." Farren leaned back in his chair. "That's almost flattering." Over the next week, Farren's ribs began to heal. He wore a brace under his uniform and avoided heavy lifting. Keth continued to shadow him, documenting every new bruise and asking increasingly strange questions. "How do you survive in a high-gravity environment?" Carefully. "Have you considered dermal reinforcement implants?" "No." "I like my skin the way it is." "Are bruises socially acceptable?" "Where I'm from, they're just embarrassing." Keth seemed deeply unsettled by the concept of a species that could appear visibly injured without being under attack. Farren tried to explain sports, childhood accidents, and even basic clumsiness, but none of it seemed to register. The turning point came during a station-wide emergency drill. An explosion simulation rocked the corridors, and Farren was thrown against a bulkhead. He hit the ground hard, groaning as pain surged through his arm. Zayla rushed over. "Can you move it?" Farren tried and hissed. "Nope, that's not right." They rushed him to the medbay. After a scan, Zayla confirmed it was a hairline fracture in his humerus. "You'll need a sling." 6 weeks minimum. Keth hovered nearby. "This injury was caused by a simulation," he fell, Zayla said. Keth stared at the scan. "And this is also not poison," Farren groaned. "No. It's called gravity and inertia." That night, Marnell updated the simulation module to include scenarios involving falls, collisions, and sports injuries. Farren's file was finally revised with a bold, red warning: high bruise susceptibility. Not indicative of poisoning. Still, Keth watched him warily every time a new mark appeared. Farren sighed one morning, lifting his shirt to reveal a greenish-yellow splotch on his side. "See this, it's healing." Keth leaned in. "Your internal systems are unpredictable." "No, your expectations are." Keth tilted his head. "Perhaps." And for the first time, he didn't reach for his scanner. 2 weeks after the quarantine debacle, Farren found himself in the gymnasium, balancing on a low-gravity treadmill while the rehabilitation rig dragged his injured arm forward in slow, mechanical arcs. The sling had been swapped for a rigid exosplint that buzzed faintly each time it corrected his joint's range of motion. Across the room, 2 insectoid researchers were attempting to learn badminton. They kept misinterpreting the shuttlecock's purpose and launching it into the ceiling with alarming precision. Farren watched one of them leap vertically, knock out a ceiling panel, and then land in a heap of flailing limbs. "Is it normal?" Keth asked, standing beside him with a datapad, "for your kind to engage in activities that lead so predictably to structural damage?" Farren glanced at the panel dangling from the overhead grid. We call it exercise, builds character. Keth tapped the screen. I've compiled a list of terrestrial pastimes and their corresponding injury rates. The numbers are extensive. Farren adjusted his footing as the treadmill shifted incline. We like risk. It keeps things interesting. You rupture tissue for leisure. And we eat cheese made from bacteria, jump out of planes, and sometimes pay to be scared in haunted buildings. We're complicated. Keth looked up from the datapad. I've begun a thesis on your species' comfort with bodily compromise. So far I have 14 case studies. Are they all about me? 13 are, Farren grinned. Glad to be useful. The treadmill beeped, signaling the end of his therapy session. He stepped off, flexing his fingers experimentally. The stiffness remained, but at least the pain had dulled to something manageable. He tossed a towel over his shoulder and headed toward the locker bay. As he passed the hydration kiosk, Commander Rune intercepted him with a curt nod. The commander's uniform was spotless as always, his posture so rigid it seemed carved. You're reassigned, Rune said, effective immediately. Farren blinked. To where? Comparative Xenophysiology, Deck 6. That's a research post, correct. Farren narrowed his eyes. I'm not a biologist. Also correct. Commander Rune turned without elaborating, leaving Farren to absorb the sudden change. By midday, he was standing in a lab surrounded by floating holoscreens, most of which displayed unsettling cross-sections of human anatomy annotated in unfamiliar script. At the center of the room stood a squat, slate-colored alien wearing an ocular rig that wrapped around its head like a sea urchin made of lenses. You are the one who regenerates inefficiently, the alien said. Farren hesitated. If that's how you're referring to my bones, then yeah, I am Tren. I requested you personally. Farren glanced around. Why? You are statistically anomalous. You heal slower than the average of your species, yet continue to engage in high-risk behavior. I find that paradox fascinating. I don't know if I should be flattered or insulted. Tren rotated the ocular rig. Neither. You are data. The next hour was spent undergoing a battery of scans, most of which required him to lie in awkward poses while machines whispered and clicked around him. At one point, a spindly manipulator arm rubbed a gel across his back that smelled like burnt mint. Does this study have an end goal? Farren asked. Or am I just your walking science project now? You will assist in constructing trauma response protocols for species with non-redundant vital systems. So, species who don't grow back parts? Precisely. Your poor resilience is instructional. Farren sat up, wiping the gel off with a towel. You really have a way with flattery. Tren handed him a tablet. Review this list of scenarios. Each one involves life-threatening injury. Indicate which ones could be survived by your kind. Farren scrolled through the list, eyebrows rising. Some of these are wild, impaled through thorax by crystalline growth. That's a Tuesday for you people, correct. That'd kill most humans in under 3 minutes. Tren adjusted a dial on the console. 3.2 on average. That evening, Farren returned to his quarters and flopped onto the bunk, sore in places he hadn't realized existed. A message pinged on his display. Zayla had forwarded him a revised dietary plan to support osteo recovery, which looked suspiciously like an excuse to cut out all the fried things he liked. He was still staring at it when the door chimed. He opened it to find Keth holding a box that emitted a faint chirping noise. I have brought a gift, Keth said. Farren eyed the box. Is it alive? Technically. Is this revenge for the treadmill incident? Keth entered without waiting for an answer. He placed the box on the desk and tapped the lid. It unfolded to reveal an iridescent creature the size of a thumb with 6 legs and a face like a surprised raisin. It is a simulation pet, Keth explained. It mimics mild distress to trigger nurturing behavior. We use them in pediatric care. Farren watched the creature tumble sideways and emit a pitiful squeak. You brought me an alien Tamagotchi. Your species favors emotional bonding as a healing catalyst. I am testing the premise. The creature rolled onto its back, wiggling its legs in the air like a dropped toy. Farren sighed and reached over to write it. Keth made a note on his pad. Response time, 2 seconds. Encouraging. I'm not a lab rat, you are a compelling anomaly. Farren fed the creature a gel pellet from the dispenser slot. It chirped and glowed faintly. Does this thing ever stop acting distressed? He asked. No, that is its function. Farren stared at it. You gave me an emotionally manipulative bug. Correct. By the end of the week, Farren had been cataloged in 8 different research logs, invited to sit in on a lecture titled Intentional Risk in Soft-Skinned Species, and asked twice if his skeleton could be scanned posthumously. One morning, Tren summoned him early. We have a visitor, Tren said as Farren entered the lab, a representative from the Vascari Medical Alliance. Farren spotted the new alien immediately. It had a body like a plated coil and eyes that blinked sideways. It regarded Farren with unblinking intensity. This is the one, the representative said, the fragile one. I prefer structurally adventurous, Farren replied. The Vascari turned to Tren. It is conscious, Tren nodded. Against odds, yes, Farren folded his arms. I can hear you, you know. This is ideal, the Vascari said. We are attempting to design emergency response systems for creatures with low regeneration index. We need behavioral models. Farren narrowed his eyes. You want to model emergency responses. On me, you remain alive despite repeated trauma. Your coping mechanisms are informative. Farren sat down. So what do you need me to do? Simulate a crisis. Tren handed him a headset. You will be immersed in a projected scenario. Your reactions will be recorded. The simulation began in a mock-up of a damaged spacecraft. The hull was ruptured, alarms blared, and a metal girder had pinned a crew member clearly modeled after Keth against a bulkhead. Smoke filled the corridor. Farren didn't hesitate. He grabbed a panel from the wall, wedged it against the girder, and used leverage to lift it just enough to drag the figure free. Then he pulled the emergency sealant from the wall kit and patched the breach, holding his breath against the smoke until the air stabilized. When he emerged from the headset, Tren and the Vascari were watching silently. You did not prioritize your own safety, Tren said. Yeah, Farren replied, catching his breath. That's usually how it goes. You risked further injury. Better me than someone who can't take a hit. The Vascari looked perplexed. You chose the pain. It wasn't a choice, Farren said. It was necessary. Tren turned to the other alien. Begin rewriting the safety hierarchy models. Include altruistic deviation as a primary variable. Farren sat back, eyes still adjusting. You're welcome. You are a dangerous template, the Vascari muttered. Farren scratched the back of his neck. Welcome to humanity. Farren's shoulder ached like it owed someone money. He was back in the medbay again, but this time upright and voluntarily. The sling was gone, replaced with a flexible support band that let him move without sounding like a sack of crumpled paper. Zayla had cleared him for full physical activity that morning, though her expression suggested she regretted it even as she signed the release. The first thing he did was head to the engineering bay. Not because he had assignments there, he didn't, but because it was the only place on the station that smelled like warm metal and ozone instead of antiseptic or algae. Plus, the vibration from the plasma coils made his bones feel less like they were made of graham crackers. Rennick, an engineer with shoulders like stacked toolboxes, handed him a wrench without looking up. Your name's still on the banned list for heavy equipment. I'm not here to lift anything, Farren said. Just observing. You observe like a toddler observes breakable objects. Farren leaned against the workbench. I'm rehabilitating. From what? A gravitational disagreement. A hallway too narrow to dodge. From being interesting enough to get roped into 7 different research projects and a trauma simulation. Rennick snorted. Should have played dead. I tried. They scanned me anyway. At 1600, Station Command called an all-hands assembly in Hall C, the only space big enough to fit the full crew without someone having to stand in a storage closet. Commander Rune stood on the raised dais, arms behind his back like they were glued that way. "We've received a delegation request from the Drellin Accord," Rune announced. "They're sending a diplomatic envoy to observe interspecies emergency protocols." Groans rippled through the crowd. Rune raised a hand. "This is a formal observation, not a performance." "You are to behave as if the observers are not present," Farren muttered, "because that's never gone wrong." Rune's gaze swept the room. "Crewman Vell, you've been requested to participate directly." A few heads turned. Farren blinked. "Come again. The Drellin are interested in your unconventional survivability." Farren turned to Zayla, who stood beside him. "Please tell me you didn't submit me for something weird." "I didn't submit anything," she said. "They probably read the incident logs." "You mean the ones labeled human injured under minor stress conditions? Those are the ones." The observation exercise was scheduled for the next morning. Farren reported to the operations deck just after first meal, where a temporary rig had been erected, a sort of mobile crisis simulator, complete with adjustable gravity fields, temperature shifts, and variable oxygen levels. The Drellin delegation arrived in a slow, undulating glide, their bodies covered in segmented plates that shimmered like oil on water. Their translator unit hung from a hovering orb, blinking in uneven pulses. The lead delegate, a tall figure with a fan-like crest, addressed the crew. "We understand this species' responses are characterized by erratic durability." Zayla leaned toward Farren. "That's the nicest way I've heard someone call you breakable." The exercise began with a simulated coolant rupture. Farren was assigned to triage and containment. As artificial steam hissed through the chamber, he ducked under a railing, slipped on condensation, and landed hard on his elbow. "Still think I'm erratic," he muttered, flexing the joint. Nothing popped, which he took as a good sign. He reached the valve, turned it with both hands, and sealed the breach. Across the chamber, a synthetic crew member writhed, coded to mimic electrical injury. Farren reached them just as the simulation flicked the temperature up by 15 degrees. He tore the jacket off his uniform, wrapped it around the injured figure's torso, and dragged them out of the hazard zone. His lungs burned, the sweat stung his eyes, but he didn't stop. When the lights turned blue, simulation complete, he collapsed onto the floor, panting. The Drellin shuffled forward. "You compromised your core temperature threshold." Farren wiped his forehead. "That's what sweat is for. You sustained dermal abrasion." He lifted his arm. The skin was scraped along the forearm, red and raw. "I've had worse from cardboard." The Drellin turned to Rune. "This behavior is consistent." Rune nodded. "It's been documented repeatedly." Farren sat up. "I'm not reckless. I just don't like watching people get hurt when I can do something. Even if you are not equipped to do so efficiently, especially then." The Drellin conferred among themselves in a series of clicks and pulses. After a moment, the lead delegate turned back. "Your species prioritizes intervention over preservation." Farren stood. "Sometimes, yeah, we don't always win, but we try." Later that day, Farren found himself in the lounge, arm bandaged, sipping something that tasted vaguely of cinnamon and battery acid. Zayla sat across from him, scrolling through a report. "You're already in the Drellin database," she said. "They've classified you as a high-risk altruist." "Is that a compliment from them?" "Absolutely." Keth arrived, carrying a sealed container. "I have brought you a gift from the Drellin delegation." Farren opened it. Inside was a flexible mesh about the size of a placemat. "It's a dermal reinforcement weave," Keth explained. "Worn beneath clothing, it distributes impact across a broader area." Farren held it up. "Fancy bruise prevention." "They called it a gesture of protective respect." Zayler raised an eyebrow. "So that's what it takes to impress the Drellin." Farren smiled. "Bleed a little, save a robot, collapse dramatically." Keth tilted his head. "You may be evolving into a cultural teaching model." I'd settle for not being a cautionary tale. That night, Farren returned to his quarters, the dermal weave folded neatly beside his bunk. He looked at the small creature Keth had given him, still chirping periodically from its container. For the first time, it was upright, blinking slowly. "You finally figured it out, huh?" he said, reaching down to tap the glass. "You just wanted someone to respond." The creature blinked again, then curled into a quiet coil. Farren lay back on the bunk, bruises fading, bones knitting, joints stiff but functional. The station had stopped treating him like a walking hazard and started documenting him as if he were an interpretive exhibit in a museum. Human resilience. Please do not replicate. He was back on active crew duty by the end of the week, no restrictions, no medical tags, no escorting medics waiting in the wings. He even got his name off the caution roster for engineering. As he walked through the corridor, a crew of Vascari engineers passed by, each nodding with a strange mix of caution and curiosity. One of them whispered something that translated roughly to the soft survivor. Farren didn't correct them. In the end, the bruises faded. The reports were filed. The diplomats left with their notes and their theories. The station returned to its steady rhythm, and Farren, for the first time in weeks, walked into a room without someone flinching on his behalf.